Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're diving into a topic that is absolutely everywhere right now, dominating our headlines, infiltrating our workplaces, and, frankly, driving a lot of our collective anxiety: artificial intelligence. But we're going to do things a little differently today. We are taking all those classic science fiction tropes and just throwing them out the window. We're not talking about conscious machines, we're not talking about rogue supercomputers deciding humanity is a virus, none of that. Instead, we are going to unpack the actual present-day dangers of AI. We're talking about the real structural threats that are operating right now, quite literally hiding in plain sight.
So let's dive into this by looking at what is essentially a massive cultural bait and switch. You've got this movie playing in your head, right? The cinematic, red-eyed robot uprising. But the reality of AI harm today is just so much more mundane, and honestly, kind of scarier. Picture this: a 26-year-old in Ohio applies for an apartment. An algorithm silently flags her application, she gets rejected, and there's literally no human available to explain why. Or think about a journalist in Manila whose mother calls her in an absolute panic because a perfectly lip-synced video of her daughter saying awful things is suddenly going viral online. Or a warehouse worker in Tennessee who gets a ping on his scanner that his break has been shortened by 4 minutes just because a predictive model decided it would bump up throughput by 0.5%. Do you see the pattern? None of these people were attacked by a malicious machine. They were harmed by systems deployed by people who moved fast, broke things, and never bothered to build in a button for a human to hit pause.
Because everything we've been trained to picture about AI danger is wrong, we kind of need a new roadmap. So here's exactly what we're covering today. First, the Hollywood AI myth. Second, the concentration of global power. Third, the erosion of shared truth. Fourth, the slow job reshuffling. And finally, decisions without a decider. Let's get into it.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the Hollywood AI myth.
For decades, our entire cultural imagination has leaned on this modern retelling of the Frankenstein myth, right? We're waiting for that one dramatic, cinematic moment of betrayal where the machine suddenly wakes up. But real technological harm, it almost never works that way. Just think about the last massive technological shift we went through: social media. The algorithm didn't wake up one morning and decide to, fracture global democracies or wreck teenage mental health. Nobody flipped a giant evil switch. Instead, the harm came from thousands of small, individually reasonable-looking decisions made by engineers who were just optimizing for engagement at scale. It was this slow, quiet accumulation of unexamined trade-offs. And guess what? That is exactly the pattern we are repeating right now with AI.
So this killer robot narrative isn't just inaccurate. Actually, it's worse than that. It's a strategically convenient distraction. Think about it. If we are all completely consumed by worrying about some hypothetical future superintelligence, the danger stays safely abstract, right? It stays comfortably in the future. But most importantly, it completely distracts us from looking at the systems causing harm right now. It gives a free pass to the companies building them, the governments failing to regulate them, and the businesses deploying them to cut costs at our expense.
Which tees us up perfectly for Section 2, concentration of global power. This is really the foundational issue under the hood of everything else we're going to talk about today.
Building a frontier AI model is not something you can just hack together in a garage anymore. That era is dead. Step 1, you need compute infrastructure that costs literal billions of dollars. Step 2, you need specialized chips, and those are manufactured by only a tiny handful of companies on the entire planet. Step 3, you need access to just mind-bogglingly enormous datasets. By design, these barriers to entry guarantee that only a very small, exclusive club of unelected tech companies and super well-funded governments can even play the game. The systems that are going to increasingly dictate how information reaches you and how decisions about you are made are controlled by a genuinely tiny number of hands.
And here's the kicker. This massive concentration of power doesn't require cartoonish villains plotting in a boardroom. It just requires ordinary, everyday corporate incentives. Companies want to grow their market share and keep shareholders happy, naturally. At the same exact time, nations are treating AI like a strategic geopolitical asset, which essentially kicks off a massive arms race. And what do race dynamics do? They structurally, relentlessly punish caution. The incentive to move fast completely bulldozes the incentive to move carefully, simply because if you pause to test for safety, your competitor beats you to the punch.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, the erosion of shared truth. This is a profound epistemic threat, a threat to how we know what is actually real. For all of human history, the baseline assumption was that seeing is believing. A photo or an audio recording was ironclad proof. Today, that assumption is completely obsolete.
Generating a totally convincing fake image, video, or voice clone now takes seconds, and it costs next to nothing. But the deeper harm isn't just that you might be fooled by a deepfake. It's this brilliant, terrifying concept researchers call the liar's dividend. Once the general public knows that perfect fakes exist, bad actors gain this powerful new superpower: plausible deniability. If a politician gets caught on genuine, verified tape doing something awful, they can just shrug and say, hey, that's an AI fake. And in a world absolutely saturated with fakes, that lie becomes incredibly hard to dismiss.
The human cost here is just staggering. Scammers are grabbing 3 seconds of someone's voice off social media, cloning it, and then calling their elderly parents pretending to be in a traumatic emergency just to steal money. They're basically hacking our oldest, most deeply wired human trust heuristics. But if you zoom out, the broader societal cost is what we call epistemic exhaustion. When you constantly have to fact-check every single thing you see and hear, it is just exhausting. So what happens? Society naturally retreats into cynicism, where literally nothing is trusted, or we retreat into tribalism, where we only trust the stuff that confirms what we already believe. And that destroys the shared reality that democracies fundamentally rely on to function.
Let's pivot to Section 4, the slow job reshuffling. Let's tackle this highly misunderstood fear of job loss.
The media loves to sell us this dramatic narrative of overnight apocalyptic mass unemployment. But the data points to something much harder to fight: a slow, grinding, sector-by-sector transformation. Look at how things used to work. On the old career ladder, you broke into an industry by doing the grunt work, basic coding, writing rough first drafts, churning through routine paralegal document review. That's exactly how a 22-year-old novice learned the trade and eventually became a capable 32-year-old professional. But now, look at the AI era ladder. Those entry-level, unglamorous, repetitive tasks, that is exactly what AI is best at automating. So the threat isn't just losing jobs today, it's that we are literally sawing off the bottom rungs of the career ladder. We are destroying the pipeline that creates experienced professionals in the first place.
And here is where the math gets really dangerous. We have technology moving at software speed. Entire industries are being upended in just a handful of years. Meanwhile, our safety nets, stuff like retraining programs, unemployment insurance, pensions, those move at government speed. They take decades to adapt. So the danger isn't necessarily a future with zero jobs. The real danger is the 55-year-old professional who gets automated out of a role today and falls directly into that massive, gaping hole between software speed and government speed.
We also have to acknowledge this incredibly quiet economic reality. If AI makes workers, say, 10 times more productive, who actually reaps that financial reward? Historically, and certainly right now, those benefits flow primarily upward. They go to the capital owners and the shareholders, not to the workers whose labor was just augmented. AI acts as an accelerant on a decades-long trend of concentrating wealth at the very top. You get exploding output, but totally stagnant wages for the average person.
Which brings us to our fifth and final section: decisions without a decider.
This might actually be the quietest and most pervasive injustice of all. We are increasingly handing over the keys, allowing automated systems to make opaque, incredibly high-stakes decisions about our lives. Everything from who gets a mortgage, to whose resume gets seen, to predicting whether someone is a flight risk before trial. Now, businesses love this because algorithms seem perfectly consistent and objective. Just clean math, right? But wait, AI learns by looking backward at historical data. If a hiring algorithm is trained on 20 years of a company's past hiring decisions, and those past decisions were full of human prejudice, the AI just learns to replicate that exact prejudice. It doesn't magically erase human bias, it just launders it. It launders our old, messy bias through complex math that looks beautifully objective, which makes it infinitely harder to detect and challenge.
And that leads us straight into the terrifying reality of the black box. If a human loan officer denies you a mortgage, you can look them in the eye and ask why. You might get a biased answer, sure, but you get an answer you can actually challenge. When a massive, complex, algorithmic model denies you that same loan, there is no human on the other end to explain it. The bias is buried deep inside a pattern match across thousands of weighted variables. There is no clean why for you to push back on, which means there's no real way to appeal. Good luck arguing with a server rack.
So, pulling all of this together, I want you to remember this quote. They don't need consciousness. They don't need intent. They only need scale, speed, and an absence of accountability. These AI systems absolutely do not need to be evil or secretly plotting or conscious in any way to cause immense structural damage to our economy, our shared truth, and our daily lives. The mundane, boring risks, they are already fully operational, right here, right now.
Which leaves us with one final, very provocative thought. As we rush headfirst into this brand new era, optimizing for maximum speed and unprecedented scale, while quietly discarding the bottom rungs of our economy and eroding the very foundations of our shared truth, we have to stop and ask ourselves, when the machine inevitably makes a mistake that fundamentally alters the course of your life, who exactly do you hold accountable? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the tough questions, and I'll see you next time.